What's up, friends? Welcome to Web3 Academy, a place for entrepreneurs, creators, and marketers to explore and learn how to use Web3 to transform business models and create thriving communities. Enjoy this next episode. GM, welcome everyone back to another episode of Web3 Academy. We have another Web3 doer spotlight today, but we have two people on the podcast with us. We have Lisa Rubin and Adam Garetson. Did I say that right? Garetson,
you got it.
Perfect. These are two lawyers in the blockchain and crypto space, and which we've never done on this podcast yet. So we're excited to have you both on here to dive into this crazy landscape of regulatory and just legal action going on in this space. Let me give a quick intro of each of you, and then we will start to dive into some of the details. But first, we have Lisa Rubin, who's a blockchain and fintech attorney at Hastings, which is a top global law firm. She represents major digital asset trading platforms, investment firms, digital asset project teams, and developers, navigating the regulatory complexity presented by crypto and blockchain, which I'm sure is not an easy thing. But Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. And Adam Garetson is General Counsel and Chief Legal Officer of Toronto Stock Exchange listed WonderFi Technologies, Inc. So Adam oversees all material legal matters across the WonderFi group of companies, which includes CeFi platforms like BitBuy, Coinberry, as well as WonderFi's DeFi platform. Adam has over a decade of experience providing legal expertise and regulatory advice to public companies across, I think, various sectors. So a wealth of knowledge here today. Adam, welcome to the episode.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Amazing. So just a quick question. WonderFi Technologies, is this Mr. Wonderful? Is this Kevin O'Leary's company?
You got it. That's right.
Okay,
yeah, Kevin is one of our strategic investors and a brand promoter. So we're very happy to have Kevin with us.
Okay, nice. So Kevin O'Leary is he's on, people may know him from Dragon's Den, and then what's the American one? Shark Tank. But actually, funny story. I have some good friends that have a cottage up in Muskoka, and it's right across the lake from Kevin. So I've had some drinks with Kevin multiple times, and I've met Kevin multiple times, and he's, you know what, he's a great guy. He's nothing like nothing like the show.
Yeah, he's a fantastic guy. He is. He
loves
Muskoka, and he does great things for the company. So we're super happy to have him here and have him supporting us. It's been great.
He's a lot nicer than he shows on the show, that's for sure. So listen, as we always do, we want to kind of explore how people went down the rabbit hole, how they found out about crypto or Web3 or NFTs or whatever it was that got you into the space. So Lisa, I'm going to start with you. Why don't you give us just a walkthrough of your rabbit hole story?
Yeah, definitely. So I had heard about Bitcoin and blockchain, but had never dove into it or anything like that. But so I started my career as a litigator in Los Angeles, and it was really exciting and I liked it a lot. But after a while, I really wanted to do more tech-focused work, and I really wanted to do something that was really fast-paced and innovative. And so I started looking around, and I joined Hastings, which has a top fintech practice. And when my litigation cases didn't have too much going on the side, then I would do some fintech work. And I started taking blockchain work more and more. And I realized, like, this is exactly what I was looking for. It was incredibly exciting. I personally think it's going to take over every aspect of everyone's life in the future. And so I loved that the laws weren't created yet, and that we could like kind of help advise on what the current laws are and be watching Congress and just seeing how it all plays out. And it's just like super, super fast paced. So now I am blockchain all day, every day, and I love it.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you for that. Adam, what about you? What was the thing that like got you interested in the space? Anything in particular?
Yeah, thanks. For me, it was a little bit of a slower burn. So, I started off practicing big law at the big law firm, doing M&A and public company governance. And then I transitioned into RBC, which is basically the biggest bank in Canada, doing their capital markets work. And through that, I started seeing the bank transition into the blockchain space. And I thought that was really interesting because having focused on, capital markets trading, equities, futures, and investment banking, it was this new world of this developing technology and how it could affect, so many different areas of finance and people's lives and everything like that. So, I came into the space a little bit later than a lot of folks. But for me, the rabbit hole was, wow, the traditional industry is really taking notice of this. They're starting to think about how to integrate it. And for me, I had the day job that was a box, but all the periphery stuff like the technology, the blockchain aspect, looking at crypto, that just kept pulling me into it. And I, looked at the industry, where it was going, how everybody was innovating, what regulators were doing, and thought, that's what I want to do all the time. I want to be part of that conversation, help grow grow a company, and really be able to, have an impact on how the laws and the regulation in our country are shaped. So at that, I made the jump and came into WonderFi.
Love it. Very interesting. It's funny, both of you, like usually it's like someone came in because of investing. They're like, yeah, I put some money in this thing, it went up. Or it's like a hobby, got these NFTs for whatever. And you guys are both of you basically were like work, kind of led me in that direction. And we were like, oh, this is actually really cool. There's so many ways that people get into this space. It's interesting. So let's start with kind of high level. I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about regulation or legal things in general. So I'm excited to learn from both of you here. But let's start high level and just look at, we hear a lot of the news about what's happening with regulatory, both in the US and Canada, honestly, across the entire world right now. It seems like crypto has been on the, is a hot topic for really every country right now. And they're trying to figure out, what do we do with this stuff? And previously it was like, okay, we need to regulate Bitcoin and crypto. Now it's like, okay, well, now there's these NFTs, there's DAOs, there's tokens, there's like all these things. And I'm sure that countries are probably just so confused. They're like, what the hell do we do with this? So give me an idea of like, what is the regulatory landscape like right now? And Lisa, you can start, and I guess you can start with the US. Then Adam, maybe you can come in with Canada, or if you guys know elsewhere as well, that would be great. But just curious, like, are we heading in the right direction? What are you guys seeing? Just give me that high level overview first.
Definitely. So I'm based in San Francisco, so I will speak to the US laws. It is really interesting. I think a lot of people have complained that in the US, the regulation has moved pretty slowly. Like there aren't a lot of laws, or really, some argue any, that really focus on crypto and provide any clarity. And because of that, I think some other people are complaining that a lot of companies are trying to move abroad where they're safer, because no one wants to get an enforcement action when they're not really clear if they're following the rules or not. But the other side of that is that I would say people in Congress that will be creating these laws, I think they are trying to make an effort to learn and educate themselves. And it's just, I think that a lot more people in Congress do understand more about blockchain and crypto than they did years ago. So we are progressing definitely in the right way. I heard a few years ago, maybe like 5 people understood about crypto and blockchain, and now there's probably like at least 100. So it's like it is expanding. I do think that it is better that if they don't fully understand it, to fully learn it. So besides just like if they just have laws left and right that end up hurting crypto more than helping it, then it's really kind of hard to take those laws back. So even though it is taking a long time, I think the plus side of it is at least they're waiting until they really understand it, so they can provide regulation that is effective and allows innovation, but also does protect consumers. So, but because Congress is taking a while to actually pass something, that gives the regulatory agencies like the SEC more leeway to go after what they believe are the projects that they should go after. So they have kind of a lot more freedom because they don't necessarily have rules that they're following. So they're almost kind of creating the rules by default by enforcement actions. And like things that I do as a blockchain attorney is we're looking at these enforcement actions. We're looking at the cases in that are in trial. We're seeing how judges are ruling, how the SEC, what factors they find risky, and help advise companies to help avoid those risks and provide some kind of clarity while, the legal process in the US to developing laws can be a little slow.
I bet. Do you think, Adam, before you jump in here, I'm just curious, like, of course, this stuff is slow. It's slow in all industry, not just crypto, right? Like that's just how Congress works. It's such a, a massive organization. They've got to, it takes time. But what's interesting though is like crypto doesn't take time. Crypto moves, and Web3 move fast, right? Like they were probably trying to create laws in 2020, and all of a sudden 2021 comes in, and now all of a sudden you have NFTs and there's DAOs everywhere, and they're like, okay, all the laws we must have written, probably we need to rethink them. Is that, do you see that that's happening? And like, is it a good thing that they're taking their time so that maybe they're going to get it right and allow some of the innovation to flourish first? Or what are your thoughts on that speed?
Was this for me or for Adam?
This is for you, Lisa, and then we'll go
Okay.
over to Adam.
Absolutely. So I am optimistic that this is a good thing. I mean, it's true. It's like once they start learning one thing that and something changes, there's NFTs, there's DeFi, like they can barely wrap their heads around, and it just takes time. But like I said, I think that they are learning about it. And I think that is really great that they're taking their time. I mean, hopefully it does go faster. I do understand or have heard based on certain senators that they are going to pass stablecoin legislation first. I think stablecoin is the easiest for people who are new to the space to wrap their head around. And so I think that would be a great starting point. People are saying that by the end of this year, I don't know if that's too fast or not, but people are saying that like by the end of this year, there should be stablecoin legislation in Congress that may be passed. It's kind of just like a wait and see game. And in the meantime, the SEC announced recently, I believe in March or May, that they are adding 20 new enforcement agencies. And they're going to go after projects such as, I mean, they listed NFTs because they haven't necessarily gone after NFTs too much. And not all of them, but the ones that they find risky. And so I think it is kind of just a waiting game, and we're going to just have to see how it plays out. But I do think it's better that they learn about it and feel comfortable with all aspects of it before issuing regulation that will be difficult to pull back.
Right, right. And Adam, what are your thoughts? I mean, you're in Canada, and as far as I know, Canada seems to be moving actually much faster from what I've seen. I mean, we already have an ETF for Bitcoin that is spot. Is it spot in Canada?
Yeah, spot
right?
Bitcoin ETFs. You got it. Yep.
Exactly. So we seem to be like, in terms of regulatory, we seem to be moving faster, but maybe I'm wrong on that. What are you seeing, and what do you think that is like versus US?
No, you're 100% right. And it's funny because it's somewhat night and day between Canada and the US right now in terms of where we are on the regulatory side. So like you were saying, I mean, we've had spot Bitcoin ETFs for the past 3 or 4 years in Canada, and that's still something the US regulators haven't really been able to get their heads around. We also have a really comprehensive set of laws that define what a crypto asset trading platform is, as well as a crypto marketplace. So at WonderFi, we own two. We have two crypto trading platforms and a crypto marketplace. And those are subject to all of the same traditional laws you'd have for any other broker dealer or trader or actual marketplace for any traditional type of equity security. So we run, own, and operate those here at WonderFi, and we do it on a fully compliant basis. You can see our orders from our regulators; they're publicly available. All the terms and conditions on which we operate, and what that means is you can come onto our platform and you can buy 20 or 30 different types of coins, Bitcoin, ETH, etc. And that is 100% vetted by Canadian regulators and pursuant to a number of different standards. So, we're relatively lucky up here that we do have progressive regulators. They have innovation mandates, and they really executed on that and worked very well with the industry. So, what that allows us to do is offer compliant crypto to Canadian citizens that, our citizens up here will know have gone through all of the regulatory hurdles, compliance with all the AML requirements, and also what our company is it's listed on the TSX. So we've got full public disclosure on our financial statements, on our operating models, on our business, on our principles. That's been through all the regulators, through the exchange listing, etc. So, what we have in Canada, and we're really lucky to have, is the ability to operate in this environment that allows us certainty with respect to our business, right? So we're not expecting any, material pieces to come down from the regulators with respect to our CFI or centralized finance trading platforms. And what WonderFi also does is we have a DeFi platform as well. So DeFi is one of the more emerging spaces in the industry from a regulatory perspective. And we are in constant and active dialogues with regulators to explain DeFi, explain what we offer, and try to shape the conversation around regulation. So it's a very, very different landscape up here in Canada. We at WonderFi are also one of the founding members of an institution called the Canadian Web3 Council. And that's a group of companies in Canada that's an industry advocacy association that directly speaks to legislators, government officials, ministers of finance. So it allows us that dialogue and the ability to shape the regulation and operate in a compliant way.
Go Canada, #1. So
Totally.
Lisa, you mentioned that it went from like 5 congressmen that understood crypto to like 100 now. And when you say that, I'm just curious, when we're talking to regulators, do they really get it? Like, do they understand what's going on here? And do they see what's happening in the future with this all? And what do they think about it? Are they okay with it? Like, a big thing with crypto and Web3 is it's removing power from centralized entities and centralized organizations, which may in the future mean removing some power from potentially government, but definitely, centralized companies. Like, are they okay with it? Are they afraid of it? Like, what are they saying?
Yeah, so I think that people in Congress are all over the spectrum. Some people don't understand it at all. Some people think it's a fraud, and I've watched some like congressional hearings or committees trying to understand it. So one good thing is that the committees of Congress are trying to hold more hearings and bringing in like the CEOs of different crypto and blockchain companies and asking them questions and picking their brain. And then sometimes they're kind of like attacking them and just really not really interested in learning. They're just kind of saying like, this whole industry is terrible. What do you have to say about this? And so it's like, I've definitely heard in some hearings, some Congress people are saying, well, crypto is used for money laundering and they help the drug cartels and, and all of this stuff. But the thing is, you could say that about cash too. It's not specific to crypto. Whenever there is a medium of exchange, it could be used for good or bad. It's just a tool. So I think that there are some people in Congress who are really trying to get this across, and they see the benefits of blockchain, and they want the US to be a leader in innovation and not just be completely left behind where all these other countries, and especially it sounds like Canada, are moving fast with the technology. And that is really good for the industry. People are going to want to go where they have regulatory clarity. And like sometimes like big things in the news, for example, when the whole Terra thing happened, then the regulators, like their attention is caught, and some people who already didn't like blockchain and crypto, they're like, see it, like, look how bad it is, it's like hurting people. And then it's like at the front of their agenda, they're trying to like work on legislation. But then other things in the US happen, like bigger things, like a big Supreme Court case comes out and it's talking about people's rights taken away. And so then now the people are focused on that because elections are coming up in November for Congress. So they're kind of like starting to focus on the most hot ticket items for their constituents so they can make sure that they get voted into office again. And so perhaps crypto may fall to the wayside again. It's kind of, it's a lot of things that are at play to see how this kind of plays out. But I do think there are some people who love crypto and blockchain and see the benefits, and others who are fearful of it.
Yeah, and Lisa, you make some really good points there, and I'll just jump in. I mean, like from our perspective at WonderFi, we love the regulation, right? Like compliant crypto is our mantra. Tell us what to do and we'll do it, and we'll get it done, and we'll bring crypto to the masses, right? And those are goals that we have that really align with a lot of the principles that regulators are focused on, like marketplace integrity, investor confidence, disclosure, transparency, right? Those sorts of things are what we bring to the industry. And I think a lot of what both industry participants and people in the regulatory space want, right? So you hear those complaints of like, oh, well, crypto is used for money laundering. Well, yeah, so is everything.
Yeah.
But we are subject to all the same anti-money laundering regulations that all traditional financial institutions are subject to. So up here, that argument's out the window, right? So that's one of the things that we really like. And, you can contrast what the SEC is doing with what the Ontario Securities Commission in particular up here is doing, where they haven't led by enforcement. They've led by regulation. So they've spoken to the industry and said, look, here's the rules, here's what we're going to put out, comply with them, get on side, and you'll be able to operate. They're not just kind of taking the gun and shooting companies here and there and people can't come up with anything consistent. We actually have a framework. And what that allows us to do is operate in an environment where we have some certainty that if you're not a regulated entity, you could be subject to the jurisdiction of the regulators. And what we're hopeful for is that, more unregulated participants in the marketplace in Canada will be subject to regulatory scrutiny, because we have to comply with all the laws. It helps, Canadian citizens and really the ecosystem develop. But the counterbalance to that is, it also helps when unregulated players are actually subject to sanction, but they know why and they know where it's coming from, and there's written laws and rules behind it.
I can only imagine that there are a lot of, and maybe you guys can tell me the inside scoop here, but I can only imagine there's a lot of companies on the sidelines that want to get into crypto, as I think, Adam, you mentioned kind of at the beginning, but maybe they're just not because there's no regulation yet. And I'm curious if that's something you are both seeing with either clients from your organization or just, in talks with others, because I know there's a lot of people listening that are like, screw regulation. We don't want regulation. And maybe not as much in the space anymore, but definitely when it was like fully Bitcoiners and it was like, they had this libertarian view of this is your way to opt out. Like, I mean, I don't see that. I think regulation is a good thing and we need it. But are you seeing that there's actually a lot of companies that can't even get in or just won't because they're like afraid until regulation happens? Or what does that area look like?
Yeah, so I've worked with a bunch of companies, either like large or small, just emerging, and just talking to a lot of the smaller emerging companies, they are very confused and they don't know about, like, when they're designing their token, should we wait? Should we, and it is causing a lot of uncertainty. And I think a lot of projects are trying to move to a different jurisdiction. For example, we hear a lot of people say, like, well, what if we form our entity in like the British Virgin Islands or Cayman and things like that? And those are options for some. But like as Adam was saying, that if you kind of work and do transactions with people in a country, and you're kind of let's say the owners are all based in the US, you're transacting with US customers, and it kind of doesn't really help you to try to be based in a different jurisdiction or country if you're still transacting. There's a lot of factors involved, but I think a lot of people are kind of scared and looking for other ways out. And I think it is really great that, and as Adam was saying, I do think a lot of companies are trying to comply with the law. They want to. So I think it is great that Canada provides these laws that they can comply with. And I think that it would be great for a lot of people to be able to follow the laws in the US too whenever they come about.
Adam, anything to add to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, from our perspective, it's been a race to regulation. Like once the door was open for licenses, the influx of companies trying to get them was massive. And right now there's 8 licenses available in Canada and we own and operate 2 of them. So, that just kind of goes to show you how reticent the regulators are to dish out these licenses until you've gone through the actual hoops. There's tons of players trying to get them. And we're lucky that we've got all of the infrastructure and ecosystem together to be able to have 2 of them. And just to kind of layer on some of the comments that Lisa was making, what the certainty up here gives us the ability to do is be a Canadian incorporated company, employ Canadians, keep resident data onshore, keep funds with custodians that are approved, right? Our customers don't have to worry that their information is, being transported out of the jurisdiction or being sold somewhere, or for a company that's in a country that, you're not quite sure exactly what the, regulation or the system is. That all leads to investor confidence. But one of the things we're also focused on at WonderFi is certainly the CeFi side, and we also do the DeFi aspect too, right? So there's a lot of traditional enthusiasts in the space that say, I want to have my own wallet, hold my own things, and be able to do that independently. And that's something that you're able to do through the WonderFi ecosystem on the DeFi side, right? You can bring your own wallet, you can connect it, you can interface through DAOs and DEXs through us, but maintain control, right? But there's another subset of people that want to get into the space. They don't know how. Owning and operating a wallet is tricky for them. So we have a DeFi platform that allows you to get a DeFi wallet. We've got a CeFi platform that allows you to trade in CeFi. So what we're really trying to do is be able to bring compliant crypto to anybody who wants it on either side. And then it's pick and choose, right?
What I'm trying to understand of where this whole regulation thing goes is we have, so there's TradFi, right? So you're fintech, okay, which is nothing to do with crypto. It's just fiat currencies, like PayPal and whatever else, all that. Then you have CeFi, which is like, this is using crypto, but it is not real Web3. It is not the real ethos of crypto, right? It is just crypto, but packaged in a traditional typical company, whether that's in the US or Canada. And then you have like your DeFi, which are like decentralized protocols on the blockchain. They don't have a location. They don't have a centralized owner. They don't have any of that. And so you can compare, like you have your Uniswap, that's your DeFi protocol. Then you have like your, I don't know, Coinbase or your Binance or your whatever FTX. And then you have something else. It doesn't matter what that, Robinhood, right? So like right now, it seems most of the regulation is focused on the CeFi side of things. Or are you seeing, like, I don't really know how they're even going to do any regulation to DeFi. It doesn't really make sense to me. I'm wondering if you guys can sort of just like talk about that a little bit. And I wonder, do the regulators even understand that enough? Because even with everything that just happened with like Celsius and all these like liquidations that just happened and going bankrupt, like I feel like a lot of the regulators are confusing that with DeFi when that's not DeFi. That's not crypto. That's just a normal entity that's holding crypto. Can you guys differentiate between that and just maybe talk about what the regulatory landscape is like in comparison with those? Lisa, maybe you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think that DeFi is even perhaps beyond what most people and the lawmakers are understanding. Like they're still kind of catching up on the general blockchain. But of course, like it's flashing in the news when companies are going down and customers' funds are locked. No one wants to see that. So I think that if they didn't understand it before, the lawmakers are going to try to understand it. But I don't think we're close. Like I was saying, I think stablecoin will be the first one. It's the easiest to wrap their head around. And I know the US is also interested in creating a CBDC and having kind of their own foot in the blockchain door. So I think that it's going to be baby steps in the US.
Right. Makes sense. What are you seeing, Adam?
Yeah, I think the CeFi side is very easy for regulators to get their heads around. And I say easy, but understanding that, there's still a couple of steps to be taken in the US before that actually happens. But, we operate a lot like an exchange, a marketplace. That's how we're regulated. So, regulators have a model. It's, a stock exchange. It's the NYSE, it's NASDAQ, it's the TSX, it's our company BitBuy, right? So that's the same model that's been applied on the CeFi side. But DeFi is a bit of a taller order for regulators to get their heads around. So, what we're doing is actively engaging with the regulators and explaining it to them. Like literally, we've got tech people who are so fluent in DeFi, speaking to people who make laws and explaining to them, this is how it works. This is what this means. Here's what it does. And here's, I come in and it's like, here's how it applies to traditional sets of regulations. And this is why we think it should operate in a particular way. It's a slower burn, to be honest, right? But at the end of the day, from my perspective, what you want is people who are gatekeepers to be able to get their heads around it, right? And then the decision is, okay, we leave it alone and let it do its thing, or we try to put some guardrails around it, right? So the things that to me are the most important for creating guardrails are industry consultation, right? Like unilateral action from regulators that really don't know what's going on is to me one of the worst ways you can approach the space, right? Like the people on the ground who are in it day to day are the ones who should be from the ground up influencing what's actually happening. So whether that's, through investment in companies, supporting particular organizations, advocacy, etc., that's the way, like anything else, you affect change. And what, what I'm trying to do is advocate for people who are bringing those perspectives and be able to be a voice upwards into the regulators. And luckily, we've got this environment here where we do have that reception and we're able to, project that voice. So hopefully other jurisdictions see what's going on in Canada and try to follow the lead. But, like I said, a bit of a slower burn on the DeFi side.
Yeah, and I think that right now for the US, like the biggest thing that they're focusing on, at least the SEC, is whether a digital asset is a security under the US federal securities laws. So the biggest thing, that we're looking at is the Howey test, which has 4 prongs. Like, is there an investment of money in a common enterprise with the expectation of profits from the efforts of others? So we're looking at that test a lot. And sometimes it fits and sometimes it doesn't. And so I think that's where Congress can come in and kind of make laws that you know, this test, the Howey test is from like the 1940s. And so some people, you know, many people say it doesn't fit digital assets perfectly, especially if something maybe was more like a security at the beginning, because you have to buy it to help the company fund the company as they're building. But then later, the token is fully functional, the company is fully functional, so you're not buying it for like the common enterprise purposes, and it's no longer a security. So I do think on the US side, there are some laws, and that's what we provide regulatory advice upon, but I do think that Canada is doing a great job by making it very clear.
Well, let's dive deeper into that for just a second here, because this is a big one, right? I mean, we have Gary Gensler all the time talking that everything's a security, and you know he's kind of going after everyone on this, and you know they really are trying to put crypto into this box that was built in the 1940s, as you said, which to me is a little bit crazy. I don't know how regulation works. Like, do you think they create a new law and new regulation for a crypto, like for a digital asset? Or do you think they maybe change the laws of a security? Or like, how do you think they go about this
So
in the
my
future?
personal opinion is that I think they will have to create a new law, but not necessarily create it from scratch. Kind of take the US federal securities laws and other laws and see how it best fits. I think one of the most comprehensive laws that have come out in the US, obviously it hasn't passed, but it was introduced into Congress, so it would still need to be like voted on by the House and the Senate and eventually get to the president, so it's kind of a long process. But one bill that had bipartisan support is the Senator Lummis and Gillibrand bill that kind of laid out all these clear definitions, like this is when a digital asset is a security, and that's when it will be regulated by the SEC. In these cases, which seem to be more broadly, it would actually be a commodity and it would be regulated by the CFTC. And so kind of laid out a lot more clear, instead of like, let's say the SEC and CFTC, two regulatory bodies in the US, kind of fighting to regulate over it. It's like Congress says, you get to regulate this, and then you agency get to regulate this one. These are the definitions, and it's really specific. So I think that's honestly such a great bill. I'm sure, you know, it's the first one of its kind that has support from the Democrats and the Republicans, so it can potentially get far. A lot of people saying this is just a good start and it needs to be built upon and amended and perhaps have a new bill, but it's a really, really good start and one of the most comprehensive bills so far, and I think that's in the right direction of what we kind of need.
Absolutely. Adam, what are we seeing in Canada? You said it's less of the, I forget what you called it in Ontario, but the SEC version of in Ontario, they're not really going after anybody. They're instead trying to create a regulatory framework. Is that really the gist of it?
Yeah, but there's another really interesting kind of nuance that flips between the countries, and we've kind of got this cool comparing contrasting going on here. So in the US, you know, you've got this fight between the SEC and the CFTC. It's kind of like a game of whose jurisdiction is it anyway, right? We don't have that here, right? We've got one regulator that regulates securities and derivatives and commodities. So, you know, basically what regulators here have said, you know, we kind of don't care, security, derivative. We're not trying to put like Bitcoin and crypto into a particular, we're creating a box, right? And it's called a crypto asset. So for us on our CeFi platform, as long as we're not trading a security, as long as we're not trading a derivative, we're not trading a traditional commodity, all those old school tests from the 20s and 40s, as long as we're not definitively hitting one of those, we're trading a crypto asset, and we've got certainty as to what that is. Bitcoin, it's ETH, it's a number of different other ones. You know, we are as a company required to do product due diligence and reviews to make sure that, you know, what we're posting for trading on our marketplace is not a traditional security. So everything Lisa was just talking about in terms of that actual test, right? We got to go through that. And when we come to the end of it and say, yeah, this doesn't look like any of those because it's based on blockchain and it's got all these features, right? We put it up on our marketplace as a crypto asset and we trade it there.
And do you think it remains that way? Because I mean, now that there are so many tokens and so many different use cases for tokens, like there's definitely a way to differentiate between tokens these days. Maybe back in the day, they didn't really know. It was like, well, everything's just trying to be a cryptocurrency. But like a lot of them now, like you have tokens for DAOs, right? You have social tokens, you have tokens for smart contract platforms. You have Bitcoin, which is its own kind of thing. Do you think it remains that way, or they start to build up more? And then you have NFTs. Are NFTs considered under the same box there in Canada, or how does that change things?
Yeah, no, exactly. So, we're still working through all the processes
Okay.
up here, right? But, we know certain ones are in that crypto asset box like Bitcoin and ETH and whatever, right? The DAO tokens, right? The NFTs, those are still falling into our general DeFi bucket. And yeah, for us, those are, accessible through our DeFi platform on WonderFi. And then we've got the other CeFi products on our traditional platforms, more traditional platforms. But I think to your point, right? There's going to be various categories. Some new like ICOs, they operate as securities offerings, right? People have known that for a while. Like it looks a lot like you're doing an IPO, and it looks like your token is a security. And then from there, it's like, okay, well, how decentralized is your asset? Does that kind of get you outside of the definition of a security or a commodity or derivative? And then from there, it's like, well, maybe there is another bucket, right? So we're trying to put like rails around the areas of buckets, but again, they keep changing, they keep coming up, etc. So, what we're trying to do is say, how do we, get our arms around this whole ecosystem as it's constantly developing? It's really tricky, but the ones that you can kind of put a pin in, do that, put those regulations around it,
Right.
make it happen, test it, see how it works, and then go from there. So that's how I see it basically developing. But like Lisa, you may have a different perspective. Maybe regulators and lawmakers in the US are trying to do more of a shotgun approach and take everything all at the same time. I don't know.
Yeah, I think right now the lawmakers in the US are mostly concerned with like just securities and the digital token. They are looking more at NFTs, but they haven't in the past. Like as far as I know, the SEC hasn't issued any enforcement actions or issued really any guidance on NFT companies. But when in May they said they're going to add 20 new enforcement agents and pretty much double their enforcement team. They said that NFT projects are one of them that they're going to look at. And I think that one of the defining features of this security in the US, at least, is whether it has passive income. And so that could be true of an NFT or just a general cryptocurrency. And, that's kind of has been a red flag for regulators. A lot of the times, I think, obviously, this is not true of every NFT, but I think many NFTs that are more like art collectibles are generally safe. The regulators aren't really concerned with that. It doesn't really fit the definition of a security. And so, those are okay, but it's when the NFTs start kind of having features of passive income or, fractionalization, start marketing themselves. Marketing is a really big thing. If projects, any type of crypto starts marketing themselves, let's say on Twitter, Medium, YouTube, like in the new SEC complaint that recently came out, they had listed factors why they thought 9 securities were. And it was interesting that they laid out their reasoning more than a lot of people have said in the past, because they had gone through a mini analysis of the Howey test and they were concerned. They went on people's YouTube and see like on an AMA, how is the founder talking about the token, and they had quotes. So it's like they really are looking at all kind of marketing statements to see if it's marketed as an investment and saying things like high APY and things like that. They're kind of sensitive to statements like that.
I can't help but think like picturing Congress just reviewing and looking into NFTs and just seeing these like crazy apes and all this stuff, and there just must be like, what is going on in this space? Like it must be just hilarious to watch them try to learn what's happening. It's interesting that they're potentially looking at NFTs as a security. I never thought about that. Of course, you think about it on the token side of things, but I didn't necessarily think of NFT. Let's say they did call this stuff a security, and they're like, yeah, a lot of this stuff happens to be security. Is there a pathway? Like, is that an issue? Like, we have a lot of things that are securities, like that are companies, right? Like, is there a pathway then if you have a token to just go and like, I don't know, get it regulatory compliant, or are we completely screwed if they're all securities?
Yeah, so that is a really good question. It's like, okay, so what happens if it is considered a security? So the problem is that right now with the current US laws to register as, you know, a company under the securities laws and get registered and all of that stuff, it's extremely expensive and time consuming, and, you know, you're going to need big law firms involved. And so that really cuts out a lot of smaller projects that are just starting out. Like, it really is, you know, the smaller projects just can't, they just can't right now. It's like they if they have to comply, they won't be able to have a business or be successful. So yeah, so that's kind of where it is right now. So it's not like a security is a bad thing. It's like there are securities that exist. It's just that right now, for a lot of projects that are starting out, it's just the hurdles are too big.
Yeah, and that's the same in Canada too, right? Like, you can think about a publicly traded company like WonderFi. Our shares are listed on the TSX, right? So you can buy and sell our stock in a very traditional sort of way. You can buy and sell securities of our company that are 100% not crypto assets, although, you know, you get the benefit of having exposure to the space in a traditional security. But, you know, what you're able to really then see from our perspective is you have to run, you know, the company and the security like a traditional company under all the traditional rules, right? So we also have to comply with all the TSX rules about listing our security, how we run our company, all the disclosure. Like, the disclosure is massive, right? Like quarterly statements, annual general meeting, like our shareholder meeting, our AGM's coming up pretty soon. So we've got to do circulars and all those filings. So if you have an NFT project that becomes a security, welcome to the world of, you know, especially publicly traded securities.
Right. I mean, the statements part is easy because it's all on a public, transparent blockchain. So, I mean, you can get that real time whenever you want. You can see what's going on with the protocol. So that's the one benefit, I guess. But yeah, I see all the other legal stuff, and that must be very, very difficult. So let's move to DAOs. We just talked NFTs. We talked already kind of tokens and the Howey test. DAOs is kind of the new exciting thing. There's so many people getting into this, and these require tokens. And so I'm just curious. And I don't know if you guys are both like involved in DAOs or if you've like gotten really into this area, but what do DAOs need to be thinking about when they go to start? If they're going to launch a token or they're going to do whatever, should they be like, you can file, I think, as an LLC, you can go as like a non-for-profit, I guess you can put your DAO under, you can do combinations. What are you guys seeing there? I guess we can do both in Canada and the US, and like any advice for those that are starting DAOs and what they should be looking into in terms of the legal aspect or regulatory? Lisa, maybe you can start.
Yeah, so we have a few DAOs as clients, so we deal with this issue all the time, and it is really interesting. And of course, it's an emerging area of law. There is no clear answer yet, but I think a lot of things depend on like what kind of transaction does the DAO do? Where are the majority of the owners? What does their token do? Things like that kind of play into the analysis. But I think that overall it is helpful to get a traditional legal structure in the US. Potentially some people do like a corporation in Delaware, and then maybe, or have a foundation in the Cayman Islands, because you technically don't need any owners. So that kind of fits with DAO. So there's Wyoming has a law, but as far as I understand, it's a really great law, but people haven't tested it out yet and haven't really done that. If a project is kind of looking for investors, sometimes the Delaware C Corp is really preferred because investors are comfortable with that. They understand the laws of Delaware. It's very friendly to businesses. So a lot of factors depend on it, but I think sometimes people think that if they don't get any type of legal entity structure, that they might be safer. But the thing is, the US regulators, at least, you know, they determine someone to be a US company or subject to US regulation if they are transacting business in the US and using US customers. So it's like the default would be a DAO could be considered a general partnership, which actually has pretty much unlimited personal liability for all of the DAO members. So it's not favorable. So let's say if you don't have a legal entity and someone from the DAO signs a contract on behalf of a DAO, but it doesn't have a legal entity structure, they could potentially just be putting themselves liable for their contract. So I think that if they, you know, it's a lot of people would not prefer to have a legal structure, but I think that it actually is better than having no legal structure, than the regulators kind of just assuming the worst.
Yeah, Lisa, like I think you nailed it. Like that's 100% accurate from my perspective. I think for people starting projects, one of the things to keep in mind, is really, first of all, what's your perspective? Are you more of a traditionalist and a purist, or are you more focused on what we think of as legal certainty, right? And I think that's what Lisa's kind of driving at. If you're more comfortable playing in this in a space where you don't have legal certainty as to what the nature of your entity is, you run the risk that a regulator is going to come find you and apply treatment to your project that is the least favorable of the options to you, which, as Lisa was saying, could mean that you and all of your members are personally liable for not just the amount of money you put in, but other stuff you've got as well. And that's obviously a negative outcome. But if you're if you take the first foot forward and, you take a proactive step and kind of putting a flag in the sand and saying, we are going to be treated as, for example, a limited liability company, that, theoretically means that the members and the creators are only liable for what you've put in. And you've got more certainty around that angle. Regulators will find you whether you want to be found or not, generally, from my experience, particularly in the US. So as much as folks like to think that they can be, outside of the scope, once the scope shines its light on you, there are things that could happen to you that you may not want. So it's, again, I think, from perspectives, of founders and members, what's more important to you, right? Testing the system, testing the space, playing in that unregulated zone, or having certainty and having, more of a proactive stance of who you are and what you're doing.
It's interesting. I'm trying. So we just launched a DAO over the last month. Our community, our podcast community, and our newsletter community, they just came to us and said, "Hey, we want to launch a DAO. We want to further the mission of what Web3 Academy is doing. We want to build resources and products and things in the space." And we were like, "Okay, sounds cool. Like, there's a bunch of people in the community, and everyone wanted to do it." So we're like, "All right." But it's a bunch of people in a Discord. A lot of them are anon. We have no idea who they actually are. I have no idea where they're from. So it's like, okay, we have this token. It's valueless right now. So it's not even on open markets or anything. So we're fine for now. But it's like, I wouldn't even know what country we should get, regulation in, because I don't even know where our members are from, So it's like, it's not that easy, I feel like. And I don't know if regulators quite understand how weird and crazy this world is of DAOs right now. And these just internet communities, like, just joining up over a token. So I guess we'll see how that one plays out. Okay, I have one more on the side of like just the different sectors we've kind of gone. And you guys both mentioned stablecoins. And Lisa, you said you think this is going to be the first, piece of regulation that we get. Maybe we can just kind of dive into that a little bit on what sort of regulation we're going to see. Like, obviously, we had the big collapse of Terra Luna and the UST, and so I'm sure that's one of the reasons why this is getting sped up. I think also, there's a lot of benefit to the US, for example, having really good regulation, because if everyone's going to use a stable coin where we're going to hold the US dollar and we're going to spread it around the world on crypto rails, that's really good for America. Why would they not do that? Is that the reason why you think this is going to go first? Or why do you think stable coins is kind of the first area here?
I do think that is one of the reasons that, the US regulators and lawmakers do want the US to be ahead of the innovation. If the stablecoin is pegged to the US dollar, that is really beneficial for the US in general. So perhaps that is the reason why, one of them, I'm sure. But I'm not certain. I also think that the stablecoin is the easiest to understand because it doesn't fluctuate in volatility. It doesn't have sure, the algorithmic stablecoin is a little more complicated design, but I think for the most part, I do think that's going to be the first regulation to pass. And from what I understand, one of the laws that has been introduced, which would still have to be voted on, has a kind of like one of the big questions for stablecoins in the US is, do you have to be a bank to issue the stablecoin? And the reason is because banks are heavily regulated, and so they would make it, theoretically safer for the consumer. So I think there is a law pending right now saying that you know, it could be banks or non-banks that issue stable coins. But if it's a non-bank, I think there's going to be stricter regulation. Like you need to have a certain amount of reserve to make sure that something like Terra doesn't happen again. And I'm not really sure how the regulators are going to treat algorithmic stable coins, but I don't think that they particularly like them right now.
Yeah.
So
Nobody does at the moment.
yeah.
Adam, what do you see?
Yeah, no, but I think that's right. I mean, we don't have any particular stablecoin legislation specifically here in Canada, but I think the principles that Lisa outlined apply generally, right? Like that, like a lot of these assets, they're global in nature. So, you know, you can put specific guardrails in specific countries, but in terms of, you know, the actual operation of the asset, it does have a global reach. So, you know, my personal view is that, you know, a USDC stablecoin would really become the primary method of transfer of payment globally if the regulation were to come in and there was to be stability. And from a regulatory perspective, that is definitely something that you could see, you know, Treasury departments being self-interested in to further validate the US dollar as the leading global currency, even if it's 2.0 in stablecoin, right? So, you know, you pair that with recent collapses in the space, and then you've got this argument to say, oh, well, we need to protect investors. And hey, at the same time, we can further validate our own currency to be the global leader. So why don't we do that first as a priority? So that's why I think the regulation is going to go towards stable coins first. But from a frankly, you know, commercial perspective, that'd be a great development generally for the space and for the industry participants. Like once you've got a coin that you know is pegged and it's going to be consistent and it's going to be able to be transferred, that allows for so much more interoperability of other coins that can similarly reference that or be exchanged for it. Then you have, you know, ability to do more in the FX space for, you know, foreign exchange purposes. So that'll give a lot more certainty and allow for more interplay in the industry as it continues to evolve. So definitely support it, and hopefully the timeline of end of year is a reality, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
It definitely unlocks a lot. I'm curious, why are we saying end of the year? What's your hunch there?
Well, for me personally, I've heard senators, for example, Senator Toomey, who has his own stablecoin legislation, he has like made the statement at consensus, which I was at the, you know, conference
Okay.
in June. He said that we will have a stablecoin legislation by the end of the year. So I don't know how accurate that is, but I know at least he's trying to go for it. And I know that I've heard it said by a few different Congress people publicly announcing that they believe that's going to be the next one, and they believe it's going to be by end of this year. Who knows if, you know, things happen. I mean, some other issue that is maybe more important to constituents may come up and it may get pushed, but at least I think that they're trying for the end of this year.
I'm curious. I'm sure there's a lot of regulatory stuff that goes unnoticed, or that's, you know, maybe in the private industry and stuff that you two might be familiar with. So I'm just curious, what are the big wins that we've had in regulation in the last, let's say, year or 2 years, if any? And maybe what are the big losses, if any, as well? Maybe you two can break down what you're seeing right now. Adam, let's start with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the wins in Canada are pretty big, I think, globally, right? We're really a global leader in regulation, in Web3, in the space. But I'll just talk about some of the wins for WonderFi, because once you have regulation, you can see exactly what companies like ours are able to do. So we started as a DeFi platform, and we purchased a CeFi regulated crypto asset trading platform. That needed regulatory approval. So we had to go to the securities commissions and get them to bless that. We did, and we got the license transfer. We had to go back again and convince them that we could operate two under the same roof, and we did. In connection with our recent acquisition of Coinberry, we had to approach the Canadian antitrust regulators, the Canadian Competition Bureau, because our total client assets under management would pass certain merger notification thresholds, big legal terms, but essentially we had to get another regulator to bless this M&A for us. So we had to explain to them what the crypto market was, what crypto is, and essentially get another set of approvals, which we were able to do. Then we had the TSX call us and say, you know, you guys are operating on a fully regulated basis. Come list on our exchange, one of the biggest in the world, and have your stock publicly traded, right? So, you know, I am not aware of companies that are able to make that claim really anywhere other than from Canada. And with WonderFi's position, we're able to accomplish all of those things literally in the past like 3 or 4 months. So the
Wow.
space is moving super fast. The regulation is there, and we're taking as full advantage of it as possible to drive it forward. I can certainly talk about some of the drawbacks too, but I'm sticking to be the positive guy in the room right now.
Okay. Well, and it sounds like those wins are, as much as they're for WonderFi, you're kind of paving the way for other companies to be able to do the same, at least in Canada. And maybe it sets a precedent or example anyway for other countries like the US and wherever else, right?
Yeah, that's what we're hoping. And we're hoping to export the model too, right? Like
Right.
WonderFi has aspirations to, do business outside of Canada as well. So we're hoping our regulatory framework can passport very nicely into other jurisdictions that may be able to follow our model and the Canadian model as we, consider taking it around the world.
Cool. Lisa, what are you seeing? What do you think the big wins are?
I think the big wins are that Congress is taking time to learn about it. Like I said, it went from maybe 5 people a few years ago, even really understanding crypto and blockchain, to now many people in Congress. And whether they have different opinions, I mean, at least they understand it enough to have opinions. So that's great. They're holding committee hearings. They're having people from CEOs of these top blockchain companies come in and explain things to them. They're really trying to learn. And I also think that there's a lot more crypto money and the US companies have put into, let's say, like lobbying or types of firms that interact with DC, so that they're going in to teach and educate about this space, and they're being open, and they're really like trying. There's a lot more money and attention on this issue, so it is getting a lot more attention. So I think that we are heading in the right direction. And there is probably, like last time I looked, at least 40 different bills that have been introduced into Congress about crypto, and that's just been in the last few years. So people are really thinking about it, drafting laws. Like, of course, the majority of these won't actually end up passing and get signed into law, but I think that that is a really big one, is that it's like in the last few years it's really picked up speed and education.
Is 40 even a lot versus other industries? Like I hear 40, I'm like, okay, sounds like it's great, but are other industries like thousands, or can we
I
compare?
mean, I guess I don't really, I can't say that. I have no idea
Yeah.
like what is the general amount of bills, but considering it used to be zero a few months
Right.
ago, or not months ago, years ago, I do think that 40 is a significant number, and it does show a lot of progress.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, thanks to the both of you. We're going to start to wrap up here. And so we're going to do two more things. One, I'm going to let you both shill anything you want, where we can find you on the internet, where we can find your companies on the internet, or wherever. It doesn't have to necessarily just be on the internet. And then I'm going to do a speed round. So we have a few questions we ask all of our guests at the end. So hopefully you guys are okay with a couple quick speed rounds. They're just kind of fun. But let's go. Adam, if you want to start, just tell us, I don't know if you're on Twitter or where we can find you, but feel free to take the show here for 30 seconds.
Yeah, thanks. No, the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, and you can find my profile just by searching my name. And WonderFi, you can see us on our website, wonder.fi. Learn about the company, learn about the industry, check us out, see what we're all about. That's what the best place to find me is.
Perfect. We'll put the links to that in the show notes, of course. Lisa, how about you?
Yes, so I am also on LinkedIn and Twitter. For LinkedIn, I don't know the actual link, but feel free to. It's like Lisa Rubin, Rubin. And then Twitter, I can't remember my handle exactly. I think it's either LE Rubin or at Lisa E Rubin. I honestly can't remember. And then Paul Hastings, if you just Google Paul Hastings, is a top global law firm. There's experts in every different area of the law. I'm particularly in the fintech practice, which is ranked band 1 in the US for chambers. So that's kind of the world that I live in.
Amazing. Thank you. And again, we'll put your actual Twitter handle and the link to it in the show notes. So we'll figure out what that is. Okay, let's start our speed round real quick here. Hopefully this you guys can answer this. I don't know if either of you two have purchased an NFT before, but if you have, what is an NFT that you would never sell? Lisa, we'll start with you.
So I'm more of a spectator when it comes to NFTs. I really love the technology, but I don't have one. I'm pretty careful about buying tokens just so I don't get conflicted out
Figured
of
this.
any cases as an attorney. But if I had one, I think One of our clients is a really cool project, Crypto Chicks, and I probably love one of those too.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't own
NFT.
any. Oh, sorry, I don't own any NFTs myself, but certainly, our company supports a number of them. I'm waiting for a traditional artist like Banksy to drop one, and then I'm going to be all in.
Love it. Okay, cool. This one's going to be for Lisa, because I guess you don't have Twitter, right, Adam? So Lisa, who's your favorite person to follow on Twitter?
Honestly, I love following stuff about regulation. So one of my favorite people to follow is this person, Ron Hammond, who's the director of government relations at Blockchain Association. And the Blockchain Association is doing some really cool projects by educating people in Congress and lawmakers about blockchain. So I like to get some updates of inside scoop of what people in Congress are saying about legislation or what is going to be introduced soon.
Nice. Adam, you said you don't have Twitter, right? So you can't answer that?
No, I can't, but I'd say follow Kevin O'Leary. I'm sure he's there. He's got some really good content.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Okay. Last question then. And this one actually has nothing to do with crypto or NFTs or any of that, but something you've purchased recently for under $100 that brings you joy. It does not need to be crypto or Web3 or NFT related. Lisa, we'll let you go first.
Under $10?
Under 100. Under 100.
Under 100. Sorry. Recently, so I love reading novels. I recently bought this novel in an airport called Book Lovers, and I finished it last night. It was a really, really good, fun, like romance novel based in a small town, and it was really sweet. So
love it.
I would say that's it for me.
Books are a perfect one under $100. Adam, what about you?
I'm a sports guy, and it's the summer, so a Jays ticket, to watch a Blue Jays game, that's going to come in at about 100 for a half decent seat. So I'll take that totally.
I was going to say, I don't know if that fits. I mean, I went to the Jays game a couple of weeks ago when I was home, and it was $100. I was like, oh damn, tickets used to be so cheap back in the day.
Right at your threshold. So
yeah,
I'll count it.
I love it. Go Jays. All right. Well, Lisa, Adam, thank you both for so much for joining us on the podcast today. This was amazing. As we said, it's our first one on regulatory, on legal. So really appreciate your insight. And I think as the regulatory landscape unfolds, we may want to have you both back on to kind of update us on what's happening, because I'm sure it's going to change a lot in the next, let's say, year or two. But again, thank you both so much for your time. I'm sure you're both very busy. And I wish you all the best.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.
Awesome. And listeners, thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy. We hope this helps you along your Web3 journey. And if it does, please share this episode and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. By the way, if you have yet to join the Discord community, you are missing out. This is where all the magic happens. This is where we learn, where we ask questions, where we network. You want to be in there. The link to join is in the description below. And finally, a quick disclaimer. Nothing in this podcast was financial advice. Crypto and Web3 can be risky. You can literally lose it all. In fact, if you invest on account of what we say, you probably will lose it all. So don't do that. In all honesty, the point of this podcast is to remove the noise of markets and price and focus on utility and implementation anyway. So you should not take any of this as financial advice. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.